This is AV SuperFriends Off the Rails, an almost regularly scheduled open discussion on audio and video in higher education. We'll sound off about our most brilliant ideas, our dumbest mistakes, and everything in between. And because this conversation will almost certainly go off the rails at some point, we'll end up covering just about everything else. And now, the AV SuperFriends. For February 11th, 2022, it's the AV SuperFriends Off the Rails. Welcome back, everybody. Time for another Friday afternoon podcast adventure. It's snowing where I am. Hopefully it's snowing where you are.
It's not snowing where these guys are. Not from what I hear.
It's 70 degrees here.
Balmy, yeah.
Yeah, we're 50. We're 50 right now on our way to zero.
Let me
the
rephrase
weather
the intro,
service has a great big down arrow.
For March, no, let's go farther than that. For July 11th. There we go. Anyway,
it's Missouri. It's still 50 degrees on the way to zero.
My name's Chris Dector. I'm joined today by Jamie, Marc, Larry, and Justin.
Yo.
And on today's show, we're going to discuss AV equipment refresh cycles, which is fascinating as it sounds. And industrial glue. Nope. Industry glue.
Close.
I don't know what that means. We'll figure it out. But first, the ever popular AV news. So this article comes from AV Network, and actually it's from about 2 weeks ago, but we were deliberately holding on to it because it is an interesting article to discuss.
We had to fill the show with something.
It has to do with QSC functionally splitting into two companies, two divisions. I guess they're probably the same company, but they're going to be two separate groups, I guess. QSC going to focus, the QSC name maintains as, I guess, just their pro audio division. And then everything else, the cool stuff, is now going to be known as QSYS. So I guess they're just kind of trying to lean into that branding, which makes sense to me. So what do you guys think about this?
I think it's
and
about,
there you have it. Riveting discussion from the AV
totally
SuperFriends.
Queued it up for us. I don't know. I see this kind of both ways. It's weird. I think there's part of like the old school QSC, like audio purists are like, oh, we don't want to be doing more of this like watered down AV. And then you got the flip side where it's like AV, they want to have their specialty things. So I can see the potential need to have two different explicit entities, but I'm not sure if it's going to make anything more streamlined. That's for sure.
I don't think it'll make it streamlined.
It streamlines product ordering or discussions about things or their website, because it's just like JBL Pro or JBL Home or JBL whatever, right? So I think for you go to QSYS and you're gonna get all of the AV stuff, the whatever, and then you're gonna go to QSC and get all of the other stuff. What I'm concerned about is all that shit's in the middle. Like when you go into the cinema grade, right? So you have the cinema processors and the cinema amps, but are they on the pro side, QSC side, or
they're on the cinema
QSYS side?
That's
or
the cinema
special. Jamie, soon you will not be allowed to look at those. They don't want to get out of there. You're not supposed to be in there. No. You are not authorized to look at this webpage.
So and it's going to be I hope it doesn't like overcomplicate that kind of stuff where you can still kind of go back and forth between the two and it's not really that big of a deal. It just kind of makes the SKUs different enough to make ordering easier.
It makes ordering easier for them, especially. It streamlines things for them, because I know from the integration side of things, the way the dealerships are made and you have to be certified in this and you have to be certified in this product. Now it's complete split. And so I think it's going to be easier for them to track, but I don't know if it's going to be easier for us or not. It may be the same. I don't think it's an advantage for us.
I think some of it too is also to separate the casual viewers, right? Because if you want to go see a touch mix and you go to QSC.com, it tells you all about the core. Well, where's the touch mix? All I want is a touch mix, because that's a pretty awesome little tool, right? Yeah. And I think this is an easy way for those new to the queue, patent, copyright, whatever I need to do, new to the queue.
I believe the term is get sued.
Whatever. Whoever's new to the queue, they can get to their product quicker.
I mean, are they actually two separate entities, like legit entities, like separate profits and losses, or is it just like a clever web page reskinning?
I think it's the same sort of tax shelter stuff that Facebook does as whatever their name is now, Meatverse, and what Google does as Alphabet Soup. That's like it's some sort of thing so they can offshore other stuff and be like, somehow we lost money last year. It's weird. I don't know. We paid a nickel.
Offshore accounts.
Yeah. So I don't know from the business standpoint. It's more of an operational division. So I don't know. Larry, your thoughts? Like you keep trying to talk.
Well, the only thing
I'm going to talk over him again.
Again, I don't know if it'll streamline anything, but what I think it might do is it might help to focus the two areas a little bit better. There's a lot of companies out there when they have their toes in both the integration side, the pro side. There's always that little battle about, okay, which engineer am I talking to? What do they know? Where's their focus at? This might just make it easier to get the answers and the product responses to what you actually want.
Are you telling me you have like one side of the house that's all like sound engineers with ponytails and Sharpies battling it out with IT folks on the other side and they can't get it together? Is that what you're?
No, never. That never happens.
I've never seen it happen. So.
I've never had a line array in a conference room.
You don't need AEC.
Yeah.
If you have a division entirely, the QSC, it's all pro audio. Does everyone there have to have either a ponytail or a beard? And
if you're going to use the word pro, you better hope.
Yeah, that's right.
Or they have been to jail.
Yeah.
At least been to jail once.
Black shirts all the time. They always have Sharpies with them.
And 90% of them have lost their hearing.
Yeah.
You ever hear them talk together? Like you can hear them like a mile away. Like
we've just
Did somebody say
like
Metallica?
No, they're great.
I'm there, man. Yeah.
I know. It's like, hey, don't argue with me. I have a golden ear. Well, at least hearing aid.
Golden brain.
We're laughing with you all. Trust me.
Yes. We'll be there soon.
I find it interesting because I will say from my perspective, and you know, when I look at things from QSC or soon to be QSys, I look at the QSys side and then occasionally go into the QSC side and spec out some loudspeakers and things like that. So I'm not in there very much, but I know. So Mark, you and Justin have both had issues with ordering, and I think it's because the dealers you were going through were like the audio side. So it sounds like they were already kind of set up this way, but now all of a sudden there's this newfangled like QSys stuff, and they're like not set up for
I think
it. So
for me, it's probably because I cut my hair, and so they were like, "Well, we're not going to send this to you."
Yeah, you don't look right.
Yeah.
Send us a current photo. You can't order that.
Yeah, for me, it was more of a very vague, responses back from our reps, and it was like, how many do you see buying in the next year? It's like, shit, I don't know.
2, 6, 100.
I can't forecast
14.
that stuff.
Exaggerate. Always.
We could sell you amplifiers and speakers and everything, but the QSC stuff, are you sure? It's like, yeah, we got QSC. A level 2 guy. We're certified, to a point. There's a little gray area there, and we can do this. We're not going to blast your support desk with stupid questions, okay? And once I said that, it was like, okay, cool.
Yeah, for us, it was they wanted to make sure we had somebody like in-house, right? And then they wanted like the org chart and mother's maiden names and the last 4 social security numbers. And
shoe sizes.
Yeah, and like a full FBI background checks on everything. And then like, oh, you're having a third party maybe do this? Well, let's double check with them. And then our criteria wasn't good enough. They wanted their criteria as well, even though we were going to do the programming. And and we had ordered these systems like 6 months prior, and it was sweet, right? But then,
yeah, it almost sounds like you were working through a dealer who was like QSC for audio, and they were trying to like sneak in the QSys stuff or something.
Like, I think maybe you guys stumbled upon it. It's just merely a support thing.
I think it is too.
I think so.
But does it need to be that complicated for me to give you my money? Like, if you want the money, like have your register open and be willing to take it. We've jumped through all the hoops.
They want your money, but they don't want any of the BS going, I plugged it in, but it's not working. There's no buttons on the front. I can't turn my knobs. They don't want those people having QSys.
And to be fair, a lot of people operate that way. I did this, I reset it, it doesn't work, I'm calling support. I'm like, you skipped about 9 steps in there. But
you have to connect your computer, and then you have to upload firmware. What's firmware? It's like, oh my God. They don't want to deal with that kind of stuff, right?
But it's even more unique because you touched on it, Justin, where it's not everything.
No.
It's just certain things. And like you can get endpoints, like speakers, all day long. They'll sell you speakers, like, sure, you have basic certification, we'll give you those. But when you want to get, the processor,
I don't know.
But then they'll turn
Do
around
we
and say,
trust
at the same
you?
time, you have to have this processor to run those speakers. I said, okay. And then they're like, well, you're not going to be able to make it work. And I was like, is that a threat? Because
We're going to ship a
I will
broken
make
one
it
to you.
work. So if anybody's listening and you want to know, you can drive maybe some wide line speakers with third-party processing and do it. And if you want to know settings and such, let me know. But yeah, you can do it more turnkey, one-stop shop. But I don't know. It's very odd that they, as an organization, kind of make it seemingly hard to use their devices. And I think I'm not sure if I get the value out of having to battle that every time.
It's not hard to use their devices. It's hard to acquire and procure their devices.
Well, and I and they're not, by far not the only ones doing that practice, but I don't know. I guess we'll find out for sure in a couple of weeks? Next week? When is
in
their
July,
big shindig?
Well, okay, yeah, they have the shindig next week, but that's all QSys stuff.
Well, I'm guessing,
but they're
we're
not
gonna
making
hear a
this
little bit
business
more.
change until July, so there may be some functional operational changes.
I can only
starting
hope
then.
there's more certification that comes because of this.
Oh, we have to get level 4.
More classes.
It'll be a new. Well, you're QSC certified. You have to go get QSys
Not
certified.
QSys
right?
certified.
I do need some RUs, so I wouldn't complain too much.
Do you think they'll go through and everyone who got QSC level 1 and 2, they'll just delete that? That never existed.
Never
You gotta start
happened.
from scratch.
Never happened.
Somebody
doesn't count
did
now.
that. Who did that?
I still have trouble with BIAMP trying to recognize one of my old certifications. I have the physical certificate, and they're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
weird, you're not in our system."
We never
Like,
had
yeah, but
that
here's your
color
paper with my name on it.
Yeah,
And
you
they're like,
made this.
"Yeah,
You
weird."
made this up.
Forgery. Fake news.
Yeah.
Bought this on eBay.
Forging documents to purchase equipment.
So looking through this article from AV Network, and I will link it in the show description. There's a comment here about any sort of changes for customers, suppliers, and partners. And then there's a phrase a comment here that says, we expect minimal change in the way our customers order products or receive support. But that's order and support, which are the two things we just talked about as having like the weirdest issues with. So hopefully they fix that, or is it going to get way weirder?
There's fine print on it. They expect minimal change, but the reality is there will be a lot of change.
Well, they expect minimal change. Customers, you guys
You
are
all have to
screwed.
change a lot of different things, but that's on you.
You have to get recertified and everything.
You have to be certified to be able to call us, so don't call
It's
us.
no
call
longer
you.
3 easy payments. It's 2 easy payments and one that's going to be a pain in the ass.
Let's not talk about total cost of ownership here. What can you afford on a monthly basis? I want to get a round number. I want to just. What do you think you can?
What do
actually
I have
afford?
to do to put you into a loudspeaker today?
Yes. Well, I don't need that big of one, so you're gonna have to really jam this thing in there.
Yeah, I'm a small person, so really just remove the cone and I'm in.
All right. Any last thoughts on QSys, QSC, and how that's going to shake out? It sounds reasonable to me. It sounds like if they'll have multiple websites, then you just kind of go to the one versus the other. But I don't know.
It'll be fine. It'll work out. Everybody
Maybe
wants
this
their money.
Is this a maturity
It'll be
level
all right.
within like their they look at all the other big players and they all have like 30,000 complicated websites. Maybe we need to have the same approach.
Their org chart wasn't bad enough. They're like, it's vertical.
But
Change that.
I have this feeling with them in particular that they are in a maturity level transition. They're basically in like business puberty with their QSys line, because I mean we've seen some of the software updates and some of the firmware updates. They're like, wait, there's a bug, and you didn't used to get those. And so I'm just wondering if it isn't.
Wait, you're saying that's a good thing?
What, bugs? Well, it depends.
The fact
Or
that they're now
business
introducing
puberty.
they're now
Business
introducing
puberty
bugs into their
is
software.
good, or
Yeah.
Wait,
Well,
I would-
but I think we've seen all kinds of businesses go through this where they finally get to that stage where they do want to take that next big step, but you got to figure out how to do it. And I think they're there because I've seen the back and forth and a lot of things like that.
You raised a good point earlier with the website. I mean, I was thinking about other manufacturers who have multiple brands under their websites.
mean
Is
like-
there a good one out there? It seems
Like
like every
Legrand?
time
It's not
that
Legrand,
might be
I'll
the
tell you
one
that
I was
right now.
thinking of. Like
So
it
right
seems
now,
like whenever
I am-
they go down that path, it just
I think they seem like
Yeah.
they're pretty sharp folks. I think they'll get it figured out for us.
I think Legrand tried to wedge so many different brands under that one roof that it really went
especially
sideways?
all at once, like all at one time. That was
This segment
pretty
basically went away from the news and became the "Who's not going to sponsor us" segment of 2022.
It's fine. I will just say to LeGrand right now, you guys are losing sales on screens because I can spec screens more easily from other manufacturers. So
Yeah, that
maybe you
website
want to
is
look
not-
at that.
That website is
Moral
not
of the
good.
story is that if you're getting your business structure right, make it easy to sell your stuff and make it easy to find it online. If you're doing something that's making it not that, think again.
Yeah. By the way, Crestron, your search is terrible. So yeah, there we go. Let's burn that bridge too while we're at it.
Let's burn them all.
Yeah. So all right.
Let's burn every bridge out there.
All right.
Any last thoughts? QSC, QSYS, websites, any of that?
Let's stop while
It'll
we're
be
running a little
fun.
bit behind.
Okay, we'll stop. Quit while we're ahead. All right. Take a quick break. We'll come back and talk about something a little less interesting.
There's a great new digital magazine from Higher Ed AV Media found at higheredav.com, and we do a special monthly show where we actually stay on topic. It's a show where we try to really focus on a single topic and break it down into AV SuperFriends style. That's AV SuperFriends on topic, found at avsuperfriends.com, higheredav.com, iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Google, and wherever else you get your podcasts from.
So our first topic today is, I think we teased it as equipment, AV equipment refresh cycles. I think Larry used the phrase life expectancy, and if it wasn't Larry, I'll give him credit anyway. But life expectancy of AV equipment. So it raised some questions as we were just kind of discussing things off air a few weeks ago as to how do we best approach this? I think in years past, it's safe to say we would look at most gear and say, in general, we're going to refresh these rooms every 5, 7, 8, 10 years, depending. And of course, you run into the thing where you've got, hey, I've got a basic amplifier and it powers these 8 ceiling speakers. That amplifier, barring some sort of mechanical or electrical failure, is probably good for 15, maybe 20 years. It's not changing. It's just sitting there all day long. So the question is, do we need to start adjusting our expectations of the useful life of AV gear as things get more complex and more capable, as we're doing different things in these spaces? Do we want to go into a space that was done a few years ago and just add some cameras and AV or some audio processing for Zoom, or should we just clear everything out of there and redo the whole space? So I'm kind of all over the place here. How do you guys handle refresh cycles? Or maybe that's 2 questions. How did you, and how do you, or how are you looking at refresh cycles now?
I've recently, as of like this week, had some conversations with folks that is changing my perspective on technology refresh in learning spaces. I'm probably using very specific words for very specific reasons. But I did kind of have that same philosophy where it's like, the date installed is going to dictate the date it's going to be refreshed, right? We kind of use these simple rules of thumbs. We get X amount of years out of processors, transport, projectors, displays, speakers, amplifiers, and we got these nice round numbers. We said, based on these estimates, this is what we should be forecasting that it's probably going to get its life expectancy. And we do our due diligence to track that along the way and know how much is being used. It's not just, we installed it on June 1st, so in 7 years I'm going to come back and rip it out and put a new thing in. We try to be really honest with it and get use metrics out of that. But recently, I've been informed that that may not be the way that capital projects in like 10-year forecasting really wants to see the world, right? And this has kind of been a little bit change in my philosophy of maybe how we should shift some of our forecasting. But I do want to couch it a little bit that the new request out of some administrative, and many universities may have the same approach, is that they want to know what you're going to refresh based on what the ask and the need and capacity truly is, right? And they don't want to say, well, you put that in there, it's going to get replaced with the same thing. I think there's kind of different pieces of this conversation, and there's what we hold as like life expectancy of the single objects, and then there's like, do you need to put it back in there when its time is up anyway? And like, or do you kind of use that philosophy? Well, we had it once, we're going to keep it there forever. And so it's interesting because I actually want to listen to us kind of go through this and see how that changes, because I think it's going to be interesting, and people even listening may have different perspectives. That I'm kind of in this transition phase on how to view this, because I think time and resources become my biggest limiting factor. So I'm going to I'm going to open it back up, and I'm going to chime in from time to time about like how I'm hearing things.
Because of that time and resources component, we used to, this school before I got here used to have a thing where they would go in and they would replace certain components of the system, and they would keep the lectern, they would rebuild the system there, and they might take out certain aspects of it, the wireless display technology or what have you, which is all well and good, but I don't have the manpower to touch these rooms that often anymore. And it kind of goes against what you were saying, but I brought in the mentality of, every 7 years, we're going in, we're replacing the entire thing, except for, maybe the ceiling speakers or something like that, something you don't have to. But everything else, just so I can pre-build the rack completely during the semester, roll it in, get in and out of that room in a day, and be done with it, because I don't have enough people to touch them more than once every 4 years or so. And so I go in for a midlife, replace the PC, and that's the only time, unless something breaks, I should be in there.
You said a really round number there, which was like the 7 year. Right?
Yeah.
I think we've all kind of had this similar conversation. Is that like the rough average? Is it like a 7 year thing? If somebody was new and walked into this right now and said, I have to replace all these at some cycle, they're holding a gun to my head, what should I give them as a cadence of refresh?
I've been at 3 schools. It's been everywhere from 5 to 8. Mm-hmm. So
yeah. We identified, and when Chris was here with us, we identified that 7 to 8 year life cycle for a multitude of reasons. One, budgetary, right? How many can we actually do in a year? Mm-hmm. Which was like 20 or 22 or something. And then, how many weeks are there? Because you got to have time to get in there and get them. And then, and what we found was that in modern non-analog equipment, so digital equipment, 3 years is usually the life cycle of most displays. 3 years is usually so you start averaging out between the 20-year amplifier that's designed to run forever and the 2-year-old LCD display that's somewhere in there. In 7 years, you should be refreshing it. So that's kind of how we ended up at the 7 year mark. It was all these culminations of budget and time and energy and all this other things.
That's like a resource management issue, right? Where it's like it's less about actual usage, but this is like I can't. Maybe it needs to be done sooner. Maybe it needs to be done later. But I can only commit to my staffing and resources at this level.
Yes, and without extra, without extra, right? And you because you start breaking it down, you're like, even if it, like Larry says, there's only 52 weeks, and so
and only 4 in which you can do anything.
Yeah, and so now if you're trying to squeeze them in the middle of a semester, we and I think we're all in the same boat. A few years ago, we started down this 7 to 10 year, and we were just going to replace as much as we could, mostly because we were transitioning from VGA to HDMI.
You mean you're putting VGAs back in?
Or digital. Yes. Because I had to pull all new 5-wire to everywhere. So
wait, why are you pulling 5-wire if you're transitioning away?
Oh my God.
Oh wait, it's a VJ Sunrise.
That's right.
But
it's hard to find.
Look, buddy,
God.
I'm 15 years ahead of the rest of you. You just wait.
Nice.
15-pin Ultra HD is coming.
But you want to get all of that old crap out, right? You wanted to go to 16.9 and get all the 4.3s out. You wanted to do all this stuff. You need, maybe finally you decided that, well, why not? Why shouldn't we put a couple of stereo speakers in the front? They're cheap. So we went down that thing, and now Mark, I think I'm in the same boat you are. Is like I'm really looking at it in 2 different ways. One of them is if I have to get in there and replace a processor, pick one: control processor, audio processor, video processor. If I have to go in there and touch a processor, chances are there's more to it. So I'm just going to do as much as I possibly can. Maybe it's not the amplifier and 70-volt system, because those are, it depends. If it's 30 years old already, then yes, they're coming down. But
do you take, so Larry, you had an interesting thing. Like, there's the difference of like building in a controlled environment in your build space versus trying to do all this in the field, right?
Yeah.
I think like you can bring things back. It doesn't mean it has to go back into the place it came from.
Yes.
You can stock that on your shelf and reuse that somewhere else, right? So
we did that a lot. We would pre-build the system, and we got it to where we could turn a room over, and it was a day and a half.
So you're talking about that's just inventory maintenance, right? So it's
and
like,
the rest of it becomes critical spares that as these other rooms that are beyond that 3-year LCD panel or whatever, we need to keep that stuff around.
But if we move that cadence and say, okay, now maybe it's not 7 years, because if I have an opportunity to get in there in a 3-year, so what pressure does that put now on your forecasting and budget model? Right, because now you've now compressed that in, and so now it makes it look like the 10 years a whole lot worse.
Well, in Missouri,
quick question: what's a forecasting and budget model?
Yeah, in Missouri, I've had the fortunate circumstance that the governor has decided that my budget is considerably less. So these capital things,
they know best. They know what you do. Yeah.
Sometimes these capital refreshes,
need that for that bridge.
They're renovating a room that had already been renovated during one of our refresh cycles, is the best thing for us, because all of that equipment may only be 2 years old and can absolutely be moved down the hall to this ancient piece of crap, because I don't have the money to replace that as part of regular inventory or regular cycles. But all of a sudden, this capital one, I can reuse that. And so we're doing a lot of that.
So just kind of buying capacity for you. They're coming in and offsetting and kind of, for the most part, just kind of subsidizing your cost moving forward, so you can reuse that elsewhere.
That's not uncommon for a capital project to bring in outside monies, and then, like you said, you repurpose what you've got in. There's only 3 years old. So
we got about 5 years into we knew we could replace the entire campus in 8 years. Everything. We had a plan and budget in place and everything else. We got 4.5 to 5 years into that. It all went to crap, and now we're just trying to get by. So we still are running on some of these 12 and 15-year-old analog rooms because we just can't get to them. And I think there's a lot of people like that way, right? There's a lot of people that way.
Yeah, we don't really have a set year. We don't have a budget. We just provide a service, and all these departments have to provide money either through capital projects, like you all are saying, or from their own funds. And so they don't want to replace unless they have to. And that's a really fine line that we teeter-totter on. So if, for instance, we have this room in the business college, and it's got old 2-wire DVI transmitters, receivers, and all kinds of weird stuff in it for displays, because it's a long bowling alley room. And, signals are blinking in and out, and they're getting tickets all the time. And our support staff is trying to repair this stuff, and they repair it and then it breaks again. They repair it. So what's your total cost of ownership of that system? So that then drives that client to say, okay, we're finally going to listen. We're going to revamp this room, and we got to get it replaced. So there's good and bad to that. Good is maybe there's a room out there with analog cabling and really old 15-year-old equipment, but we don't get any tickets on it. That doesn't need to be replaced because maybe it's either not being used or not adequate. Not really exactly sure why, but we know it probably needs to be replaced if it was useful in the room. But if nobody's complaining about it, why should we do anything about it? Because that seems to be a waste of time and money. So we kind of just...
Is it still providing the service that it was in original intent was?
Maybe. Like there could be, an English teacher up there just still whacking away at that Epson 15-year-old projector and the 4x3 screen, and it's just magnificent to her. I don't know.
Sure. But why is it always the business college that has these weird antiquated dinosaur rooms? Why do they always have the most complex, most weird? Is there some weird cahoots where all the business colleges are on the wrong product cycle?
I think
across
they
the country?
try to
what's
be.
Going on?
Ours aren't.
They try to be on the cutting edge.
They always do. I always feel like they're on the cutting edge for a moment, but it's like they're buying into the last edge.
I think. So our experience with that is that they're on the cutting edge, but they ride that purchase
yes
for as long as they possibly can.
Because their bean counters in that college along with the econ professors and everybody else. And those bean counters like, no, I don't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, sir.
Because I know that now I'm on my second business school renovation. And when they put it in, it's really nice. But there's not really in year 3, we're going to refresh thing. We're going to ride this thing until we absolutely have to find money. And then Daddy Warbucks comes in.
Most of the time
there
when
is
I
more
go to
Daddy
these,
Warbucks than I'm like, why can't I get a giant checkbook?
You can.
I don't-
You just need money
you
in
can't
the
order
account.
them
Order checkbook.
Yeah.
yeah, we get you one of those big
Just carry
lottery
it around.
checks.
Yeah, next time you go to Hy-Vee, you're the guy at the front of the line writing a giant freaking check.
Yeah, but I want the whole book.
$42.83.
Like I want to, like,
Yeah,
hey, help me
check
tear this
book.
out of here.
Yeah, then you got massive.
Most of the meetings that I go to on campus now to look at bad equipment, to refresh that room because there's been so many complaints about it. Most of the time recently, just in the past 2 to 3 years, they'll start off by saying, "I'm sorry, Justin, this stuff just doesn't work." And they're trying to, I guess, apologize for laying into me because of their frustrations.
Right? It's just that.
Well, there's a few there, maybe
Justin just
not.
has been ignoring them.
It's been up and down. Well, my job is to
Spam
ignore,
folder.
right? Yeah. No. Yeah,
Filter,
it
right
goes
to spam.
Perfect. Oh, support spam.
That reminds me, new
it's just-
filter.
And so I have to explain to them. I said, your computer is under a 3 to 5 year refresh cycle, and that's newer than the AV system. Why would you expect it to work for 20 years? And they don't know what to say. Like, why would you expect your car to work if you're not going to change the oil?
So
And-
you bring up a good point though. So like, let's talk about the subsystems here for a moment, and because I think it's important to the conversation is that like, you brought up the computer piece. Jamie, Larry, we kind of said, well, speakers and processors may be one thing, and transports this is like,
Right.
do we all look at a space and say the subsystems have varying timelines for their refresh? That in a perfect world we would kind of keep it in line with that. And if so,
I think that's where
what do we
we've
think
all
they are?
started.
Yeah.
To say that this thing will last much longer than that thing, just because of the nature of what it is. But maybe that's changing, or maybe we need to look at it differently.
But
Larry, you brought up an
you-
interesting point from the standpoint of computers, and since you mentioned that, you said you try to get your replacement cycle to align with a double computer replacement cycle, just because it seems to line up nicely on paper.
I've actually proposed we extend our replacement cycle from 7 to 8 years, so I can fit that half year or half cycle PC replacement. If back when we were doing wireless displays technology, I would throw one of those in there too at that point. But luckily, we don't do those much anymore. But yeah, because it's one of those things. Like the PC is the one thing that's going to age quicker than anything else.
I'm wondering, is
That's
it?
the thing.
Or,
Is it though?
Current state, current.
Is
or do
it?
people
Yeah.
simply accept they need a new PC every 4 years, and when you tell them that, they're
Exactly.
okay with it?
I
Yes.
think there's a lot of end products that are that way. For instance, lamp projectors, right? You knew you could get 4 or 5 lamp cycles through it, and that projector was toast. And people, you can almost look at folks and tell them, hey, we need to replace this display. Let's just say it's a display. And they're like, well, why? It's still working. And it's like, but have you replaced the one in your living room? Well, yeah, I replace that like every 2 or 3 years. Yes.
Well,
That's why, right? You can kind of.
I would
use
argue you're having the
cars a
wrong
lot,
conversation at that point. What I was going to say was people seem to accept PCs because it's something they understand. They've used for long
It's been
enough. They have
around
them at
longer,
home.
yeah.
They've been around for 30 plus years as far as the personal PC, whatever. So when you say you need a new PC every 4 years, also PCs because it's something of a perishable asset because it gets so full of their crap, the performance does
Like a phone.
degrade.
It's like a
Well,
phone
and,
now too.
and that's where I was
Again-
headed with that display thing, right? People are used
But
to
people don't
replacing
fill their-
displays.
People don't fill their displays with crap. What I'm saying is computers get slower because people abuse them, and you can blow away a computer and it almost feels like it's brand new if you maintain the computer appropriately.
if you know how to do it too.
If you know how to do it, right. But most people don't. They don't care. That's fine. But a computer is like an accepted thing of every 4 or 5 years, I need a new one. Whereas
Yes.
you
It's
put that
disposable
display
now.
in,
It's
and
disposable.
Jamie, you go in and say, you need to replace that display. And they say, why? I just bought it. And you say, yeah, 6 years ago. But
I
to
moved it
them,
over
they
here from this
just
other
bought
project.
that. Why
Yeah.
doesn't that keep lasting? So
Yeah,
I'm just wondering if
exactly.
computers are almost a special case because people know what a computer is and understand, even if they don't understand the computer itself, they understand that it needs to get replaced every 3 to 5 years.
And I don't care if that projector or display, it doesn't matter to me. If it was $200 or $50,000, they still have the same question. Why doesn't that last 20 years? And that's a little bit, exaggeratory, but it's
because that
it's
aligns with that's their capital model, and they want all this infrastructure to be in alignment.
They didn't pay
with
for
the
it in the first
model.
place, right? Yeah,
and I guess also IT did a good job back in the day of communicating, ongoing costs of replacement cycles for computers. A lot of that had to do with Windows and operating systems getting updated. Like, hey, this isn't our fault. Windows updated this OS. We have to replace your computer. Like, I guess so. We don't have that advantage in AV. Like, well, Samsung updated the OS on this new model, so you need it. No, this one's still working.
Crestron just came out the other day and said they have no intention of fixing a major security issue on some of their switches, and their little suggestion is go buy a new one.
Exactly.
That's engineered obsolescence right there.
Yeah. What's interesting about the PC replacement model that was established in most of universities is when that was established, there were leaps and bounds happening between model year PC requirements.
Yeah, like, sure.
If you look at like the past 3-4 years, PCs aren't improving that much anymore.
That's very true, but it set
8 years.
It set an expectation and it set a trend. But you are right,
it set
Larry.
A trend, but right now, if you maintain that PC, I have no doubt that thing would still be working the full length of my AV replacement cycle.
The only thing that drives computer difference is like software requirements that become more capacity hungry, and content being like moving forward. But we're all in this kind of HD world where it is what it is. Like we're getting the same level of content everywhere we go. So,
and if the AV system doesn't change, that's not going to be. We're not going to expand that capability, even if we put in a new PC.
So there's like two like weird competing things bouncing around in my head here. Is that like one? Does AV stuff not last long enough, or does it need to die sooner? Like what? Which one is this? And like, are we to align better? Like, do we need to get more life out of it, or choose more cost-effective items that are going to die faster to align to try to get a more like acknowledged budget refresh? Like,
which increases
what's going on
labor.
Here?
That increases labor and resources, though. And what's your total cost of ownership if you do cheaper material, right?
Because I mean, Justin, you've already been accused. You've been accused of installing gold-plated equipment.
Gold-plated, buddy.
Because but there's a perception around that, right? Is the AV stuff already like perceived as it's too boutique and expensive, but yet it doesn't quite meet the capital definition we want to see in it, and it's really this. It is disposable-ish, but not the same way computers are, because IT did a good job articulating that.
It's also that, but it's also a little bit to do with, I think, the people that make the money decisions, and not, this is a general statement, aren't using the AV and aren't experiencing the AV. Therefore, the money people are only going to listen to the squeaky wheel faculty. Like, I cannot have my class if we do not update this projector. Then that request goes, because if it's working, AV support will say, well, we see an image, we see it's dull, you need to update your projector, and then they leave because it works as it is. And so then we just sit back and wait for a project request. It's like, okay, will that faculty member or that person that called that problem in get the word up enough to hit the dean, and the dean says, okay, let's do a project, I'm going to find some money and we're going to get this updated. And these are one-offs, and it's,
But what is dying early? I mean, most of the gold-plated things are lasting 8 and 9 years now. I mean,
exactly.
How many of you still have? I'm just gonna. I mean, DM. I mean, even the original.
We have a lot of DM. Yeah,
people listening to this are probably running QM out there. I'm sure there's plenty of QM still.
Oh, yeah.
We got a couple QM.
And, the things that die are basically LCD displays, right?
Mm-hmm.
The one thing I'm kind of curious about, and to build on that, Jamie, is we have tons of DM. We have tons of that stuff. These past couple years, we've all been forced to move to different technologies just because of availability. We've all done more, at least I've done more AV over IP in the past 2 years than I've done previously. I'm really curious what those life cycles are, because I'm basing it upon what I know.
You're hoping
not
it gets
upon
to
what
be
I
the other one,
bought.
right?
Yeah. And those are the ones that, yes. So those are the ones that concern me at this moment, is that I'm not sure until we know that
it hasn't been a life cycle yet of one of those.
Yeah, that this is going to be the thing, because we've even seen that have many iterations of transport. So I am still using AV over IP as far as video. It's more of a distribution than an actual central hub, because I cannot yet plan a whole building and think it's going to last 8-10 years, where technology, networks, encoding schemes, it's just so much that you have to keep track of, that the end points. And that's what bothers me about the cost of some of the end points. It's like, yes, I if it's $1,000 an endpoint, it's on average, that's crazy. So why don't I just put a switch in front of it? Now I only have one transmitter and I don't have 5. And if something goes bad, I just replace that one transmitter or that one receiver. It's just, that's a big question mark for me as well. And I'm still chalking up AV over IP devices in a lot of my spaces as being those replaceable boxes later on. I'm not
Expendable
counting
items.
on them. Yeah, I'm not counting on them to last 5 years. In fact, I'm buying them knowing that they won't last 5 years.
So when you propose a project, even if it's a one-off or whatever it is, do you provide estimated lifespan of all your components, or do you use round numbers as all of it?
No, I try to. In groupings. I'll group it as like endpoints, and that runs into microphones, displays, projectors, things that people have traditionally understood break. Mm-hmm. People see these things break, or like wireless microphones is what I'm referring to as microphones.
So, Jamie, out of curiosity, when you provide an estimate like that, is that estimates you're providing to, say, departmental spaces that they're funding? Because I would never give them a guarantee like that.
No, well, it's what I do is, for instance, I'm doing a whole building refresh, right? So I break it down into what it's going to cost today, and then I go ahead and try to give them the guesstimate of, you need to set this much aside every year for the next 8 years. And we do the
same thing.
And I break that down into, because we anticipate you're going to buy a new, and Chris, you know this, the video wall. You're going to buy a brand new $200,000 video wall in 5 years. And lo and behold,
by the way?
No, we're still sitting on it, and they want to, but they won't. But
see, so now we're on
here or there.
9.
But I do say there's certain core components that you really, those are the ones that we look at as 8, 9, 10, 11 years, and those are, and I group them. That's the audio DSP. That's usually going to last that long. That's the amplifiers and the speakers. They're usually going to last that long. That's the network cable is usually going to last that long. I don't guarantee any of it, but I say, in our experience, this is what's happening. That's how come your budgetary replacement should be more in year 7 and 8 than it is in year 1 and 2. So, but I do try to break that down when I can, just so they have, because what happens is 2 and 3 years down the road, we find out all the projectors died, and now somebody's on the hook for these $40,000 units.
Well, somebody should have told us what it was going to cost, Jamie.
Yes, and I'm tired of that,
that's
right?
Where you forward the email from.
Remember
4 years
that
ago.
email from 10 years ago or 15 years ago?
Yeah, and I've done that several times. It's the "I told you so" moment, and that you guys make fun of me about.
This
but
is the year of "I told you so," isn't it?
I
think so.
I tell you a
I
lot.
told so.
I told you so, but I do re-forward that and say, hey, remember when we first put this in? I gave you this guesstimated lifespan, and it was 5 years, and that you needed to plan for that. Now, unfortunately, most university systems don't allow you to have a savings account.
Exactly.
So that's a whole nother discussion that we don't need to get into. But the idea is, hey, look, you got to keep these in mind. We all know what blows up in a couple of years, and we all know what usually doesn't. Mm-hmm. Usually. AV over IP, I'm not sure where it falls.
To answer the question about per device or per room, we actually do both. Our asset management requires us to put the expected life cycle
interesting.
or useful life of every device. But then I budget according to the life cycle of the system or the room.
Mm-hmm.
So Mark, you said, and Larry, I want to get to that because it intrigues me from this idea of modularity. You brought it up earlier. Like, we used to consider different lifespans for different pieces of gear. I knew this thing would be good for 10 years. This thing's, a screen's good. A screen, barring need to change size, and if I could adjust stops or whatever, that's good for 10 or 15 years until someone walks in with a marker or a knife, which I've seen both. Or somebody really pulls on the motorized screen. That's my favorite. Hey, the screen came down. It made a bunch of cracking and tearing noises, but now it won't go back up. Yeah.
Tab tension.
Anyway, but should we be looking at these things from a holistic approach of, hey, I'm going to go in and replace these 4 things in here anyway, because it's been that agreed upon 4 or 5 years, whatever that mid-cycle replacement is. So since I'm in here, I'm going to take out the rest of the stuff that I can justify doing, and maybe I save some of that for spares because, hey, that amplifier's still good. I'll use that somewhere else. But would that make better sense from just to treat a room as a single product almost? This system is a thing.
Yeah. What if you scheduled an email if you said, okay, your life expectancy of this is 7 to 8 years, and then you schedule that email at 6.5 years after your project's done, and then, let's say you leave the university or whatever, and then they get hit with a reminder like, hey, your bill's due. Would that change something, or is it forgetfulness that we're having problems with? Because I know if somebody sends me an email and I'm, maybe it's not my core business practice and I'm not focused on it. Hey, you need to do this in 7 to 8 years, and we're relying on somebody else's money, and then for them to trigger the project to ask us to replace it, that could be a communication problem.
It totally could be. But to me, like, I'm not 100% sure we're asking the right questions. In the concept of like life cycle, it's not the time, it's the usage, right? And so we have to have a jumping off point, like how much usage are you actually getting that actually sets your life cycle?
So here's an example of, I would say, things done wrong done wrong and for the wrong reasons. When I think about that, yes. So we have a bunch of rooms here on campus that 2 years ago with CARES funds, they said, hey, we need to upgrade a bunch of these rooms to be hybrid capable. And so they did the typical thing of they bought only what was necessary to make those rooms hybrid capable, leaving the older stuff in place, which on a general scheme seems okay. But to your point, Mark, the usage had changed. So in modifying these spaces for the new usage, but leaving all the old stuff behind, and they just kind of slapped stuff in there, wirings all over the place, cables just kind of hanging out. It looks like Radio Shack exploded in the back sort of thing. Now support for those spaces is awful, to the point where I am right at the edge of assigning technicians to go room by room by room, tear everything out of these spaces that already exist and rewire it, reinstall it, re-put it back in, because then at least it will be supportable to support this the new usage. So that's one where somebody looked at it from the standpoint of what would it cost to adapt to this new usage, but only to that new usage. And they probably should have looked at the spaces holistically and said, okay, we need X number of, there's over 100 of them out there. We need X number of fully hybrid capable spaces, whatever that might mean to you. But we need to do those correctly, which means starting from scratch and redoing them, because by leaving everything that was there in place, including all the existing gremlins and weird oddities and things that sort of work and don't work, they never addressed all that. They just kind of like stacked this on top of what was there. So now we've got these chimeric systems of stuff kind of just out there that are a pain in the butt to work on. Yeah. And so they looked at it purely from the usage thing, but didn't consider it as a holistic system. So that's what I'm wondering, is that the better play that next time that comes around, because of whatever the usage change is, just say, I'm going to scrap this and start from scratch.
I think that we're all going to see the pressure, right? And so as enrollments and things change in school, it's not about when you installed it anymore. It's really about how much usage you're getting, where's the college projecting enrollment's going to go, where do you need to focus those funds for upgrades on that? And great, and being able to provide the metrics of usage. It's really important to know how much usage you're getting. There is something to be said about regular maintenance, but regular maintenance doesn't mean necessarily I have to go in there at 5 years replace it or 7 years replace it, but it's being very targeted and very specific about using things more intentionally so that you know you're going to get the life out of it, and it's going to where the university wants to see those investments go.
And see, we're looking at that too, but we're going about it a different way. Instead of looking at, okay, this room only has this much usage, so we're not going to update that room. We're looking at it, okay, I'm pushing for this right now. Our enrollment's down by this much percent, therefore this many percentage or these many rooms have to come offline.
Take them offline.
You have to cut it somewhere,
and
right?
those will no longer be part
Right.
of the replacement cycle.
Yeah,
so,
you have to gain that capacity somewhere. It's like if you know you got to make strategic investments over here, what are you going to give up to give you the capacity with the pressure knowing that enrollment's going down, therefore money pots are dwindling around as well.
Yeah.
So you have to say, we can't afford to keep it all. So if we don't need the capacity, where can we get rid of it?
that way I'm still only going in the room one time every 4 years for a half, one time every 8 years for the full. But we're trying to correct size our learning spaces for the enrollment size of any given year.
And then you have the ever popular, and I only want to teach between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m. 3 days a week.
Yeah.
So I need 600 lecture halls during this four-hour period. But at 4 p.m., I have all these empty lecture halls. So yeah.
Go wherever you want. It's open.
But
All right, well-
don't you find that your usage usually dictates if you're in there more often or not? I mean, for me, I've been pretty fortunate because the ones that are really heavily used and want to be upgraded are the ones that I'm in every 2 years in order to recycle those parts. Like, they're the most heavily abused and want to be updated. And that's
I think there's
my little
like
world.
there's a
This is my
precipice
world.
there. Like when things get to a certain age, the usage becomes much more impactful to them. Where like I've done newer installations over the last 2 or 3 years, and I'm just like, man, we don't hear a peep out of those things. They just run, and that they're just going right. I'm always like, is the power off? Do they have an inability to email problems or whatever it is over there, and they just go right? But then
I don't spec power as part of my system.
so they don't even turn them on. So I wonder, like, but there is that critical point where you're like, okay, this system has hit an age where it is becoming more problematic due to whatever is going on. Because of whatever they're culturally, people have to have all these weird adapters or whatever it is. So it just creates more strife in our ticketing world. And those should be your targets. Like if they are being heavily used and you're getting a lot of tickets out of it, that's like the opportunity to go in there and rectify that.
Yeah, that's pretty much how we operate. If we're getting a crap ton of tickets and support's upset because it keeps breaking after they go fix it, or they can't fix it, or we had to go steal some kind of random dinosaur off our shelves and monkey it around and try to figure out how to wire it in and make everything work. There's a lot of times right now we're having a lot of MPS 100s die. Imagine that, right?
No.
So what do? We just wire the VGA straight into the computer and say, well, if you want more functionality, we got to start a project and got to find the money. And
You're future-proof of that VGA. So
yeah,
Oh, yeah.
you know.
I do also think that related to that, Justin, is that the complexity of systems can affect that dramatically. I mean, I have systems on campus that were clearly designed by committee. They are absolutely, utterly, terribly engineered active learning spaces that are just, the sort of thing where if someone said, name 10 things you should never do in a system, and they're like, we'll do them all.
we walk into this room.
And then they're constantly having issues with it to the point where, and you guys can't read it, but one of these things back here is to go in and tear that stuff out at my expense and fix it just to get it off my radar of a constant thorn in my side. Like, for example, today I was designing a lecture hall, which has been problematic in the past. And right now it has 2 equipment racks. There's an equipment rack in the closet, which is a 44 RU rack, which is full. And then there's one below the lectern, which is probably an 8 RU rack, also full. I designed this whole system and everything fits in an 8 RU rack. And I was talking with my engineer.
I've used 44 RU for any project ever.
Well, yeah. So, but he was looking at this going, where'd all the stuff go? I'm like, I just got rid of it. I don't need that. And he's like, well, there's a 32 by 32 DM chassis in there. I'm like, well, not anymore. There ain't. It's like, why would you have that?
For what?
Don't worry about it. It's a trailer block now.
And so it's just one of those things where, as we are a little more intentional about our designs too, can we address the ultimate needs of spaces in a way that do not make them so complex and so prone for failure and replacement that it fits better into a replacement cycle? And I think the answer to that is yes.
It's absolutely yes, because we just did that same thing. Yeah. So we just upgraded our auditorium in JRH, our little media building. and it had 2 racks. It actually had 3, one at the lectern and 2 40, 45 RU racks. We got rid of one of those, and it just had just all kinds of analog stuff and stacks of amps and stacks of DSPs with IOs. And, it was just older equipment. That's kind of how you did things. And it was set up to do press feeds for some reason, right? It's like, we don't need that anymore, just
Nothing press-worthy coming out of here.
Yeah. So most of that money was spent on a better projector and better DSP cores and better back-end solutions, and slimmed it down. And now they can do what they need to do more effectively, instead of having, well, I got to press this button and stand on one foot and all this stuff.
You can do a lot more with a lot less now.
Sure.
But we look at the example we've brought up in the past year, like the 323 system. Everybody listening to this knew when they were sitting at home in a pandemic, they were like, these are going to be a problem when we return to campus, because culturally, people are training themselves at home right now how to do soft client conferencing, and they're having a fair amount of success. And yet those systems on paper still provided the same experience to those users, but we knew operationally they have to go, right? And it probably wasn't even on a scheduled lifespan. Like, they probably should have been gone long ago, but people held on to them forever because, like, well, I can still video conference with these things. Are fine. The dean says we need them, so we have them, right? But they came back and they're like, I don't want to touch all this crap. I don't want to deal with all this extra
shit.
Difficult. Just give me a computer. And then there they are on Zoom in a computer hooked up to a codec, wondering why nothing works. And so then there's like these outside pressures we don't have control over, right? These cultural things that happen and that will come in and sideline any of our best laid plans, because people just don't want to operate like that anymore. They don't want to have to do these different things. If I saw it on Oprah, why can't I do it in my classroom? Like, it should work that way. And so we have to be able to keep our finger on the pulse, so to speak, to make sure that we're providing intuitive solutions that faculty can use and students can use, that are not like burdening them in the process. And I think you probably all have seen your help ticket queues where that's just the perception of something not working, right? It's just not working the way that I think it should be, and therefore nothing works. And so what does that mean? Does that mean the system's broken, or does it mean like the system is just a different perspective and it's not going to be successful for those users anymore? I don't know.
Well, as expectations change, as use cases change, as needs change, systems will change, and hopefully we can leverage that to be a little more intentional about our designs, our engineering, our support cycles, and our replacement cycles. I do like the idea of a modular system. We'll see how that plays out. I'm going to try something similar here, because I keep hearing phrases like, "Oh, as part of our 10-year replacement cycle." I'm like, "Well, yeah, but we replaced 2/3 of the stuff already. So is it really?" So.
30-year cycle. We're gonna put every 10 years I come back.
We're going to put a pin in this one, because otherwise we'll keep talking. And we do need to wrap this show after we have one more segment. We need to wrap this show. We're going to take a quick break right now.
As many of you know, the Super Friends have always been better received when we have more input from you. So here's your chance. Send us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and get involved with the show. We're looking for some topics to discuss, some fellow nerds to talk to, or just general AV awesomeness to brag about. But remember, we'll probably steal your ideas. And I suppose we'd take some criticism, but that wouldn't be very nice. Anyway, drop us a note at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com and find out how quickly we ask you to join this nonsense.
All right, so for our last short segment here, we want to talk about some industrial solvents and industrial glue. Now, what we want to talk about is...
I find it if you put it in a tin can and up to your nose... Wait.
You got to put it in a rag. Put it on a rag first, JB.
And really huff that out behind a middle school. So we've been referring to these as the glue that holds the AV industry together. And these are the things that you don't start with on a system, but you use all the time. So these are the little manufacturers that make the little tchotchkes, the widgets, the adapters, the converters, the scaler, what the little tiny things you put between two other things to kind of really make that work, because everyone starts with endpoints, your source and your sink, but they don't always think through how to make all that stuff work, and invariably you end up in a space where it doesn't quite line up.
And you forget about these things.
You forget about them.
Until somebody says something, you go, I love that thing. I forgot I had them.
And the good news is they're relatively inexpensive. And to the point of our earlier conversation, they tend to live forever for the most part, barring some sort of mechanical or equipment failure sort of thing. But they tend to run for a long time because they're usually very simple. They do one or two things and they do it very well. So I've got a list of them on here. I don't know. Do we want to go through the list in particular, or do you guys just want to kind of throw it open? What are some of these things you really love?
Let's throw it up. Let's couch it by the elephant here real quick. Don't engineer around these. You're not trying to make these in your standard design. They're usually to help do something simple. And somebody at home is screaming, yes, or in their car, engineer better. We get it. We understand that. Yes, you should be have an awareness to not need to have rogue weird adapters in your system, but sometimes you just have to get them, right? And so, yes, do it the best you possibly can, but every once in a while you just got to convert something weird. So.
That's right. Okay, yeah, that's fair. So some of these are things you ostensibly probably should not be using,
right?
But what they work really well, but they're not something you really should like count on as being there.
Yeah,
they will save your
problem fixers.
They're
like,
problem fixers.
I need to go to RDL's
website every time, but
yes.
they're not something you want to start with.
I say that every time.
Well, there are some on here, though, I would say are fine to start with.
Yes,
but they're
ones that are closer to the end. Yeah.
The weird glue at the end there. So Justin, you just mentioned it. Let's start with RDL. RDL makes Radio Data Labs, I think. They make an entire line of fantastic little widgets and adapters and converters and switchers and line drivers and the infamous divider combiner.
Divider conqueror.
And they work. And they work
and they're
well.
Great. But it's like, should you need
every
that?
time? Every time I go to the website, I literally say in my head, oh shit, I'm going to RDL. Why did I screw this up? What could I have done better? Like, I love you, RDL, but damn, what did I do wrong?
But on the flip side, in the 20-some years I've been doing this, I've used countless RDL products. I can't think of the last one that went bad.
No.
Replacement cycle, 50
forever.
years.
I've had power supplies for them die, but the things themselves are rock solid. Yeah.
And
that is one thing that pisses me off about them.
Just abuse them. And they always, I like their little, if you go talk to them, they're like, well, we designed for the space shuttle. Like, yeah, you did. These things work.
I had one like in the console of an installation van in the Midwest. Drove around the country with me for like 5 years. It still worked afterwards.
Of course it did. I'm sure everybody at some point was like, I'm going to build a mixer out of really weird little RDL components and just like, have the most random
It has to be
thing.
switched by
And
touching jumpers
for
to
little
captive
jumpers
screws.
and tweakers.
How do I do
everything
gain
out.
structure on this contraption?
Tweaker on the side and you turn it up and down.
So this next one is Global Cache or Global Cache, depending on how fancy you are. Jamie, you use the crap out of this group.
I've gone through phases, right? And it's usually because like Justin says, like, damn it. Whoops. Yeah, whoops. How come I have this projector lift and I can't get it to go up and down because I'm out of contact closures?
Mm-hmm.
How do I fix it? I've used their IR products. Same deal. It's like, this TV didn't actually have network control. That's all I have here. Buy this thing at $99. $99 fixes my world. Mileage did vary, but I just uninstalled a couple that I'd had in for 10 or 15 years. So they're solid, and it is a whoops, I made a mistake. That's a $99 fix, and nobody gripes for $99. Nobody gripes.
Or they're little network adapters that are networked to IR and stuff like that. It's crazy. And you're like, I shouldn't be doing this, but I'm going to because of X, Y, and Z reason.
You feel bad about it every time. You're like, man.
Zoom room.
I should have.
You're building Zoom rooms with Justin.
But
I should be a better engineer.
I've had a couple of instances where I knew that I was going to have this issue and I had to engineer it, and I was pissed off because whatever Tron I was controlling with, pick one, to get the same IP to relay control box was
$1,000.
$800. I'm like, you got to be out of your goddamn mind. So you buy this thing from Global Cache, $99. It does the exact same thing and it works. And so there's been times where I've done that.
The works is kind of pushing it. Like it works like when you first put it in, and then.
Well, I think, like you said, Justin, I think we all like these things because they tend to go for a long time. So
I think it depends
I've
on
had
your
mixed luck.
application.
I think you're right. I've
maybe it
had
depends on
mixed
what you're
luck
doing.
with them.
I would say
Yeah.
if we further define this category of the industry glue, it's also, these are not like your Amazon basics.
You're gonna get the invoice.
No
paid.
name brand
You're
things.
gonna
and
get
your
it installed. The
mono
invoice
prices.
is gonna get paid, and then
Yeah.
move on.
Yeah.
All right. So
Move
next one on our list here is Hall Research, which changed their name to something else recently.
Hall something.
Wow. Okay.
Hall's Mentholyptus. Hall Research makes an entire. Well, let me look up their name because this
They make a lot of stuff, man.
Hall Technology, I believe, is what they are. Hall Technologies.
They're one of my 50-50 companies. Like 50% of the time, the thing that I'm getting from them works wonderfully, and 50% of the time, I wish I would have got something different.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you just described
I've
the AV
used them
industry
for
there,
like.
so.
Hall
Well, for
Technologies.
troubleshooting, for these kind of little trouble boxes, I kind of need something I can rely on. I don't want to spend $150 and find out it didn't work, or $400, $500. I should have just spent the $800.
The pieces that I've used in their line are primarily around the USB extension. Right, I've used a bunch of those, and they've been pretty rock solid.
They're extenders in general, USB, DVI, HDMI extenders. If you need like just basic point to point, sometimes they're not true like HD base T accepted standards. They're just like, I'm going to fire a thing between two boxes.
I've never seen a box like this. I pulled up their website and they've got a 4x4 matrix switcher with analog and Toslink audio de-embedding per input. I've never seen anything like what the hell?
That's cool.
They got some boutique
I
things.
used for several years. I used they were one of the only people that had one. Was the HD base T distributed out, so you could put one HDMI in, and you got 3 HD base T outs. I wasn't trying to run control over it. I just wanted HD base T video, and they ran
little
great.
DA. But so in like self-service cuddle spaces, their HDMI USB extension has been rock solid. Little decor, throw it in the floor box and put the receiver behind the display. Like that thing's been rock solid. So just go.
In general, I think most of their stuff is. I mean, and it's kind of like, I'm not going to tie this into a larger system. This is a thing that goes from A to B, and that's it. And I need this thing, and it cost me $249 on each side, and now I'm done. And I know it's good for 10 years, sort of thing. So. Let's see. Next one up, Black Magic. As much as we all kind of recoil at Black Magic's name based on certain, maybe reliability or bad experience we've had, at the same time, kind of like Justin just said about what he saw on Hall Technologies website, Black Magic is often the only company that makes that thing that converts this to that, and it's $90.
Well, they sit like really in this oddball spot of like, you got to get this broadcast thing into this non-broadcast environment. We got a thing for that. And I'm always shocked. I'm like, it's only that much shit. If it dies tomorrow, I'm fine.
$114 bucks. Jeez.
I'll buy
This is being harder
go-
and harder to keep out of the higher environment.
I'm like,
I think it's time for like to reassess
HDMI
Black
to
Magic.
SDI?
Yeah, I want to like reassess. Like we've had some time. We've had years and years and years, and people were so anti Black Magic about everything, and maybe rightfully so.
I've put it in several jobs lately.
But man,
my experience with that was it was almost a diva syndrome. Like those of us that came out of broadcasting, Black Magic was sacrilege because it was quote prosumer. It wasn't real. This isn't broadcast gear, and now we're looking at it going, works, do it.
It's done. But we just talked about life cycle, right? This thing is gonna get me to the end, and like it's seemingly good enough to deliver what people seem to think is
and
good
also
enough.
they still seem, for whatever reason, to be the only company that makes that sort of thing. Like, what, you want to go from SRT to SDI? Here you go. And you're like, weird. Why would they?
The
be
conversations I've had with broadcast people about Black Magic is usually revolving around, once you get it to work, it'll work for 1,000 years. But getting it to work sometimes is the problem.
Well, I think,
and I think they've gotten better about that over the years.
I think a lot of people who are like anti the Black Magic as a toolkit were like, this is never going to hold up on a production truck, right? This thing's going to get beat to shit. It's going to die.
They put it in the worst environment possible.
Yeah, it's like it's not.
They stack it as tight as they can. Like
you're
Larry, like you said,
go
they're
to
driving around in a truck for all summer for years. Like, I think crapped out after only 2 years in here. I'm like, well, what do you expect? So
it was.
I do know that some of their power supplies have been
and it cost you $67.
Some power supplies in the past have been a
Yeah,
little
exactly. Here, I
sketchy,
bought
but,
you 4 of them. And this one keeps your coffee cup
There's
warm.
your
We
20-year
could go all day on
replacement
this, but to keep
cycle.
it short, I'm going to bring up one last one, and this one is Magewell. Magewell makes all sorts of little converters and streamers and odds and ends like that. I've had people kind of bulk when I say it's a, some of their products that I use, I really like are their USB and are their HDMI and SDI to USB converters. I've had people bulk, they're like $350. I'm like, yeah, but I know I can put it in there. I can leave it behind something in a rack somewhere for 4 or 5 years. It's fine. I don't have to worry about it. But they make all sorts of little odds and ends to convert and switch and stream. And they give you the added bonus features like, oh, and here's the free loop out, or here's the audio injection. And you can connect via software and go in and screw with the levels sort of thing. So
you can name your USB
nice little
connection.
features. You can name the USB. Yeah.
Which is the big one.
It took me several years to get around to major. I always chalked them up as to being the Chinese tchotchke that would never work. There's no way this could work. You can't capture HDMI to USB. This would never work. This came from some whatever. I get this off Amazon, so I just never did it. And then I started buying some of them, and I'm like, well, do you know, I was wrong. I don't say that very often, by the way.
Well,
and this is the one that so Mark and I, Mark, when did we start using these, like in 2015, 16 sort of thing? We just had a bunch of them around for some reason. I don't know how we found them or tumbled to them, but we were describing at Infocom at a presentation kind of like, and we use these, and there's a room, like 300 people in this room, and like everyone started writing down their name. And then everyone immediately afterwards ran down to the booth to kind of like go look at it because it's on the show floor, and there you are. Jamie, to your point, like, I've never heard of these guys. I'm just going to go look at them. And I wandered by like an hour later just to kind of check in, see what they had, anything new. And he goes, oh, are you the guy that just sent like 40 people down here? It's like, apparently this was a thing to like go find a reliable, because to your point exactly, Jamie, you can go buy all day long on Amazon an HDMI to USB converter for $30. And they're probably fine for the 10 minutes you're on a call at home. But do you want to put that as the critical last little inch component between your entire massive AV system and your computer in your classrooms? I sure as heck do not. So
that's
one thing
like,
to say about
and that
them
5 or 10 years ago, or not 5, but 5 or 6 years ago, when you were saying that 2015, 2016, the idea that you were capturing HDMI to USB was, there's copyright protection and it's high definition. What the hell? There's no way it works. That's why I poo-pooed them for a while, and I was wrong.
Their support, by the way, is fantabulous. So we have an old HDMI to USB converter that we got with the Media Site system, right? It actually has a Media Site logo on it, but it's made by Magwell. So that was bought, I don't know, centuries ago. We call them, and they're like, hey, we got this audio blipping out on this Magwell. What do y'all think? From our
system. We saw it from here.
And we told them, it's
We've
got
been
the media
you for years.
We got the Media Site logo on it. Can you all what do y'all think? Can you do? Yeah, man, send it on. We'll send you a new one, no problem. Like, really? It's like, no worries, dude. We got you.
Did you pack up the whole media? Did you pack up the whole Media Site?
We just sent the whole Media Site RMA, the whole system to him, and said, just give us 500,000 Magwells.
They shipped you a bunch of converters back. Here's 4.
Keep
3 or 4 of them. You're good. It's worth it.
I think we'll periodically return to this topic. This is kind of a fun one. I think there's any number of these things that we all use routinely or know we might need routinely. They often come in and they save our butts. So it's great that they're out there, and we're always discovering more. I really like the Audinate AVIO series. It's like, hey, I just need to go from Dante to USB, done, boop, and it's like $100. Like, what the heck? Yep. So there's things out there that you can design those in, but maybe there's better solutions. So anyway, we'll come back to this one periodically, see what happens. There's probably more stuff out there. So we'll catch you next week.
See ya.
Well, we've managed to ruin yet another episode of AV Super Friends Off the Rails. You can contact us with questions, topic ideas, or general complaints at mailbag@avsuperfriends.com. If you complain loud enough, we might just invite you on the show.
Nice work, everyone. Sharp broadcast. Really good. Everyone on the floor as well. Really a lot of hustle. I liked it.
The opinions expressed by the AV Super Friends are solely those of the individuals and do not represent their respective institutions, organizations, companies, or clients.